Welcome back this week, y'all. Okay, if you got to listen to last week's episode, we had a lot that we were talking about. Yes, Quinn?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I thinking back on that episode, there was so much there that as we built out this second episode, I thought this one has just as much, if not
Yeah.
even more. So, we have learned a vital lesson, y'all. Most of our episodes will probably be part ones and part twos in the
Yeah.
future. That is just how we go with a topic that is this big. So, last week was us coming from a listener's email. If you haven't listened to that episode, definitely listen to that one first to kind of just, I thought we did a gorgeous job just diving into some of the nuances, the perspectives
Mhm.
around that first take on this, which is if you are divorcing someone, but they're still a good guy, I'm putting that in air quotes, in
Yeah.
that they're still going to show up, they're still going to parent. That was a lot of, we spent a lot of time on my story and my
Mhm.
perspective because that's what ended up happening in my situation.
I think it's also notable that even if a woman stays, but she wants to improve her economic situation so that she has more choices in the future, she may need to get childcare if she hasn't before and build that into the structure of how she stays. And a lot
Mhm.
of the things that we spoke about last week isn't just about an ex-spouse, it's the discomfort that you may feel in trusting anyone with your children.
Yeah. And we specifically were realizing that, like, a lot of what last week's episode was focusing around is how you let go of your self concept as the mom. If you're
Mhm.
going to get divorced, and I love you making that point, you may, in order to provide for yourself, need childcare now where you are not the
Mhm.
primary caregiver or your caregiving is split 50-50 with your spouse. And if, as I was, you, a stay at home mom, if that is a
Mhm.
huge part of your identity, there is a whole process and work to do around that. So that episode's amazing. Definitely listen to that one. Lots of beautiful work to do there. But this one is going to be, I really feel like, kind of a whole different ball game and flavor because
Yeah.
we're going to be approaching a very different scenario where you are considering divorce, but
Mhm.
you, as that listener said in her email, you are
Mhm.
actually worried that your children or your child will experience neglect, abuse, emotional abuse when they are away from you with their parent. And your role in the marriage may have been more of a, like, I'm the buffer between my children and my spouse. I'm the protector. I'm the one, like, I actually know my spouse isn't safe and I wouldn't want to leave my children with them for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they have mental health issues.
Mhm.
Maybe they're just in general more neglectful, or I think I even was a little bit worried of this just because my spouse didn't have that much exposure to being around the kids.
Yeah.
So it can even be, well, they just aren't the primary parent. And I don't know
Mhm.
how that's going to go down if they become that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that for me, there was a lot of me being the buffer and negotiating the relationship between father and children. It was not
Mhm.
uncommon for there to be disagreements or challenges in their relationships, and I would kind of
Yes.
coach my spouse to help him have empathy for what the child was going through and
Yep.
encourage my children to forgive and you're going to be out of the house soon. Let's all get along. And so removing me from the situation, because as we know, when we get divorced, it doesn't mean that the children don't have access to the other parent usually. More often than not, they're going to be with that parent. You're just not going to be there to act as
Yep.
that buffer. And there were a lot of unknowns there, but that is one of the things that kept me in my marriage for so long, was just that worry, that unknown.
Yeah. And I think that's really what the listener was that was the heart of that message
Mhm.
was in her specific instance. She even mentioned, her own like childhood trauma feeling like it was mirrored in what she's seeing with her husband and their child, and that mother's ache of like, what will happen if I am not here to
Mhm.
facilitate or to protect or to negotiate that relationship between the two of them.
Yeah.
So, we're going to start off the episode by kind of diving into I think I want to start with just your story of kind of big picture outline of what you experienced in your process. And I want to
Mhm.
start that off by saying that when you were considering divorce,
Mhm.
Untamed had just come out, right?
Yes, 2020. So we hadn't gone through the pandemic yet and the post-pandemic divorce tidal wave that came from us spending a lot of time with each other in many marriages. But I had this fantasy for sure that I was going to be able to be friends with my spouse post divorce, similar to what Glennon and Abby show is possible in
With
their
her
life.
ex-husband.
Yeah.
Yes, with Glennon's ex-husband. And
Yeah.
it was we read Untamed and that whole doing Thanksgivings together and having him still be such a big part. We definitely I saw lots of women that read Untamed and would come to me and be like, "This is the goal." Or when they talk about conscious uncoupling,
Yes.
right? Like we're
Yes.
gonna both respect each other. We're going to understand that maybe this isn't a fit for us, but we need to go our separate ways and we're gonna act respectfully and appropriately as adults for the good of the children and interacting with each other. So you kind of had a little
Mhm.
bit of this, which as we were going back, it shocked me to think that you actually had, I think you said in your decree, you had like shared birthdays and
Yeah. I thought at the most foundational level that this man I was divorcing, I thought he would be a good dad. And I also believed that we would remain friends because I was not divorcing him because I hated him. I was not angry at him. I had just crossed the line where I was not willing to be married to someone I couldn't trust anymore. And we
mm,
did our own divorce decree, and we wrote it that we would have shared birthday dinners for our children. We discussed amongst ourselves about having vacations together still. We were going to have weekly video calls to discuss the kids. That was a part of the decree. But within a year post divorce, I had called Child Protective Services and I was ultimately granted a protective order because of the physical abuse that would
that
happen.
showed
It
up.
wasn't regularly, but it was like every 3 months, and it got so bad that I had to get a protective order.
Yeah.
Another part of this is that he married very quickly. Within 6
Mhm.
weeks of our divorce, he married a woman that he had met. I think he met her on a Monday. They got married on a Wednesday or Thursday of that week. And she also struggles with anger, passive aggressive comments. She really lacks impulse control and because of a brain injury. And so I have,
Yeah.
some compassion, but that's just the way it is. And they seem to feed off of each other, that
Yeah.
her anger because of a brain injury and his anger, it just kind of all worked together.
It was like a perfect storm that kind
Yes.
of we went from things when you got divorced, I don't remember. It was not contrary to what you guys have heard on the podcast around Quinn's divorce. You may
Mhm.
have thought like, oh my God, she was exiting, fleeing the
Yeah.
marriage. But things were
Mm-mm.
actually probably the most stable, maybe perhaps for your ex husband's mental health
Mhm.
pre the divorce,
Yeah, he was
which,
very, very sad. He did not understand because I had put up with his lies from the beginning of the marriage. And so for this last lie to be the last lie, he didn't understand that, but he was
mhm.
not violent. He didn't scream at me. He was upset, but I really thought, I really, really believed that we're going to get through this. I expected that he would get remarried and I would be best friends with his wife and she would love my
Yes.
children and that it would be really great.
Yeah.
And
It
surprise,
wasn't. It just yeah, and
no.
that is gonna be a huge part of what we're gonna talk about in the episode is how do we make peace with what is when it doesn't go the way that
Mhm,
we were hoping or expecting it to be. I wanna real quick before we dive deeper into your story, I do wanna give just, like, the outline for where we're gonna head in the episode, some of the main points. We're gonna be focusing on 3 different areas because
mhm,
as you guys can tell, this is such a gem of an episode with you, Quinn, because that is such a, I mean, in my mind, like a worst case scenario for a lot of people of
yeah,
your spouse not having enough really mental health on their own to
mhm,
function without you being there. I mean, you said it last week. It was so good. You were like, the patriarchy, I did not realize how much the patriarchy had stunted
mhm.
his growth as an individual and as an emotional adult.
Yeah,
So
he did not have the skills. And I
mm-mm.
realized that after the fact, because one of the reasons I felt like he would be a good parent is that I had taken trips. I had gone for days at a time or a week at a time, and everything had gone fine, but I didn't realize it went fine because I had structured everything. I had
Massively.
coached the children, I had written the menus, everybody knew all the things to do. So when you remove that, it just wasn't
Peace.
strong enough within himself to function. But
Yeah.
yeah, tell everybody where we're going.
Just to preface you on the 3 points, because we want to give these 3 areas of, what do you do if this is what happens? If you're
Mhm,
afraid that your spouse is going to be the one who, when you leave, and even if you're not afraid, but this is what ends up in Quinn's case. So we're going to talk about first how you can separate out your fear from the actual risk. And
yeah,
that's really addressing that first, our listener who wrote in last week of, we sometimes get our CPTSD mixed in from our own childhood trauma projecting onto our partners.
mhm,
So that's just a space we need to start in.
mhm,
And along with that, creating safety for your children in your own home, regardless of what's happening there. There's a lot of things you can teach them that can help mitigate what's happening in the other home. The
mhm,
second area we'll be focusing on is being honest about what you can control and what you can't. And this is one of the toughest areas for so many of us, especially those of us that are codependent, that our way of
mhm,
coping is codependency, controlling everybody, trying to keep everything perfect, keeping everything the way we feel like it needs to be for everybody to be safe. And then finally, and this is the part I'm most excited to really dive in with you, Quinn, is how do we come into a space of accepting that we married this person?
yeah, and then
And
had children with them.
yep, because if you cannot like come into acceptance that this is what it is, this is the choice I
Mhm,
made, then you're unable to make the best of it going forward. So that's a
yeah,
little preview of those 3 gorgeous areas that we're going to be diving into, dissecting as we go through the process. But now I want to bring you back. So in your instance, you think it's going to be okay.
mhm,
With you guys married, this was the level he was functioning at. But then he
mhm,
makes choices right
mhm,
after the divorce in choosing to partner with another person. And I do want to emphasize that I think this piece was a big part of what has destabilized his mental health is bringing in another
yeah,
individual. I mean, in my instance, I got very lucky. That's the only word I have that my ex-husband did not get remarried and has not. Neither of us are remarried. We have not introduced other children
mhm,
to our children. We haven't started new families. And I think that did allow us some time to kind of get our feet underneath us. But in your instance, he
mhm,
went and got remarried almost immediately, which
yeah,
honestly to me was an indicator that, like, oh, he needs another woman to
Yeah.
survive.